Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry podcast series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
In 1962, you were appointed Dean of the School of Dentistry here and have been the Dean since that time. How did you come to the point in time that you were appointed to the deanship? Was the procedure the same as it is today, and what led to your appointment as the Dean?
Well, the procedure, I guess, was similar, although search committees at that time, roughly 20 years ago, were rather new and hadn't been accepted in the manner that they have now. In fact, I don't know if the name John Perkins means anything to you or not. He's an illustrious graduate of this university who was at that time president of the University of Delaware and later went to the University of California. He's retired now. But he told me, I was working part-time for the American Council on Education at that moment, and he wasn't talking about dentistry. He was talking about search committees for deans in general. He had stopped and had a conference with Marvin Nias, who at that time was the executive vice president of the university here, and told him that he thought that the university should not start such a program of search committees. They had had one or two. That the president and the vice president of academic affairs of a university would find that their careers would depend upon the people that they selected as deans, and he thought they should make the selection, therefore, and not leave it up to somebody else to make such a selection. Well, obviously that viewpoint was not accepted in the world, but at that point it did indicate what some people felt about the whole procedure. What happened here was that in probably about October of 1961, the faculty had a meeting and elected a slate of candidates for a search committee. And they, I've forgotten quite how many ultimately wound up on the committee. I think 8, so probably 16 names were produced, sent to the president of the university, and he, from the 16, he took 8. Dr. Dorr was the chairman. I won't try to recall all the people on it. Dr. Myers, I think, was on it, the one who was just chairman of this search committee. And Dr. Kerr, Dr. Schultz, I've forgotten, it's a long time ago. And they went through much of the procedure, or many of the procedures that this committee did, and turned in their recommendation to, then it was Roger Hines as the Vice President for Academic Affairs. So that's the way it worked.
Was there a particular activity as you developed through the administrative tasks that you were talking about earlier that you felt strengthened your development that led ultimately to the deanship? For example, the Kellogg activities, or any particular?
I can't think of any one thing. Lots of things get lumped together, I think, Joe, and how it all comes out and whether somebody likes the version is what that all depends on. But I know internally the strengths that I would have looked at, and I don't know if anybody else did. I've handled the budget of this school since about 1947, which is a long time now, and I'm really happy to be giving it up, I can tell you. And in those days, I didn't have the complete last word on things, but somehow people found I could add and subtract, and so Dr. Bunning would, within certain ranges, give it to me, which seemed kind of strange, but that's the way it worked. And Dr. Jesuit was willing to do the same thing. So budgetary matters have never been a problem. I mean, to me, to handle them. We might not have enough money, I don't mean it that way, but just about working with a budget. Working with the American Council on Education during the survey of dentistry was something that I think helped me a great deal. Working with people many of them outside dentistry. Arthur Adams was the president, I think they called it, of the American Council on Education at that time, and there were a number of college presidents and so forth that you kept rubbing shoulders with in, throughout this survey. I was looking just last night, or yesterday afternoon, at a group of papers. I threw them all away yesterday, but where I had been presenting pre-professional education for dentistry. There was a man from the University of Chicago doing it for business administration, someone else doing it from law, someone from, I think, Springfield, Massachusetts, doing it for theology, Eric Walker doing it for engineering from Penn State. He was the president of Penn State. And so I got into a unique, with a unique group of people. So that meant a lot to me. My Latin American activities, of course, sure, I think that I don't know what they mean to working in a dental school in the United States, but they meant an awful lot to me about how I felt about myself, I guess. And then I had worked with the ADA quite a bit. In fact, had been offered a position of Secretary of the Council on Dental Education in 1961, and I didn't take it. And you might think, gee, he didn't take it because he was waiting to see if he'd be dean at Michigan, and that wasn't true. I had a son at that point who would have had to have been taken out of his senior year of high school, and I didn't want to do that. And literally, I didn't, at that point in my life, care that much about whether I was dean or not. If I had been left right where I was as associate director of the Kellogg Foundation Institute, I'm sure I would have had a happier 19 years, these most recent ones, than any other life I could have led. But then that following year, when they were looking for a dean, things changed, and the alumni split, one group favoring me and another candidate who shall be unnamed. The faculty didn't split like that. But I didn't know by the middle of the 61-62 school year whether I was going to be dean or not. And like I said, I really didn't care when it started, but by the time early 1962 came around, I realized that if I didn't become dean, I probably wouldn't want to be here, because so many things, I don't know how to explain it, but you're really going to be dean, or you're going to be looked down as somebody that lost out or what have you. And then I had made an agreement that if I didn't become dean, I would go to the ADA and become secretary of the Council on Dental Education. So that was what I would otherwise have done. So, about what the strengths were, I don't know.
It sounds like you had a very broad spectrum developmental process, though, on an international level, as well as from budget to international scope, I imagine. As you look at contemporary dental education, what kinds of experiences would a dean coming in today, would they have to have that kind of background to be an effective dean today, or something new?
I'm not going to try to guess what you need to have. Guess you need to have whatever some search committee thinks you should have.
Certainly, and I think financing of dental education would be a major issue from a dean's point of view, and be able to deal with funding of your facility.
Well, the ability to get money, I guess, is one of the biggest things in any form of education. And so whether it be for bricks and mortar or for operations, you do have to get money, or you're going to wither on the vine. So that becomes important by whether it's your personality, or whether you've got a gun like a hold-up man, or what, somebody got to get money.
What were some of your greatest challenges during the past 19 years that were either challenges or accomplishments, or things that you were particularly proud of?
Oh gosh, it's hard to talk when you throw all those words together, challenges and accomplishments and what have you, but I guess that Frank Rhodes, who's now the president of the University of Cornell, when he was still here, said, Bill, no matter what you ever do, the thing you're always going to be remembered for is that dental building. And that was his view of it. You could accomplish, you could write another Bible, but that wouldn't count. I suppose that is one of the things, getting a building, and we needed it sorely for many reasons, just to get rid of old facilities, but to get additional space as well. At that point in time, I'm sure that the state needed more dentists, so we needed to expand our enrollment. And yet that it was not enough. You don't educate people with bricks and mortar. You got to operate the place. And after you did get by the initial hurdle of getting a building, I guess probably the biggest problem was getting money to operate it. And by that I mean to hire faculty and to have supplies and what have you. And we really have gotten the money and would right this moment be in a pretty good position, except in the last several years, for one reason or another, the university has taken quite a bit back away from us through priority funds and taxes on all schools in the university. So we're not in as good shape as we would like to be, and somebody's going to have to go get some more money, which at this point in time looks hard, but I don't know, I've always been kind of an optimist. The pendulum swings back and forth. I've listened to people in our university administration probably 20 years or 25 years ago talking about how looks like the university's come to its end, you know, and never going to be able to accomplish much more, but it always works out one way or another. Now, I hope the automotive industry works out that way too, because we are very dependent on it. But the first thing, of course, was getting the dental building. And that had its origins back in the 40s. Some of us, we just automatically felt by looking around us in that other building that we needed another building, but that was kind of off in we didn't know what to do about it. And one day, somebody, I guess it was on our own campus, I guess it was a fellow by the name of Jim Adams, called Dr. Bunting and told him that apparently there was money in the state coffers, and how would we like to start buying a new dental building, and that we'd have to expand the enrollment some. Well, Dr. Bunting came and talked to Dr. Jesrick and myself, and we were all for it. And then he went and talked to the secretary of the State Board of Dentistry, and that fellow said, we don't need any more dentists. And Dr. Bunting took his word and went back to our university administration and said, we don't want to participate, which broke my heart at that particular point in my life. Then after Dr. Jesrick was made dean in 1950, and that probably was 2 or 3 years after the episode I just described, we talked more about it, and Dr. Dorr and I set off to try to make some sketches about the expansion of the dental building. We had no notions at that point in time of tearing that old building down and replacing it. All we could think of was adding to it, getting enough money to add to it. And we took over the room that later became Dr. Hard's office, and I'm not sure, Dr. Kowalski's in there now. I think that beautifully paneled office in the Kellogg building. And I can remember when Bob and I sat and tried to build out to the east with what eventually, or what was kind of a forerunner of our research tower. And then moved back into what at that time was a parking lot, and where our current clinic building is, tried to extend the old clinic back into that area, and the whole building really, but getting more clinic facilities by just going back in that direction. Well, it's quite a slope off, you know, or was, from that parking lot down to where Washington Street was. And what Bob and I had, we tried everything we could think of, but we weren't engineers. And we didn't know when we extended that clinic floor north toward Washington Street or Avenue, whatever it is, was that going to be the 4th floor or the 7th floor or the 8th floor, or what was it? So we finally got a fellow that walked back and forth in front of the school every noon for lunch, Bob Aiken, who was a plant engineer, and got him to come in one afternoon and explain what our problem was and what we were doing. Well, he was amazed at how much we had accomplished, really. And I don't mean that we had architect's drawings, but we had schematics where rooms were going to be and had the things thought out pretty well in terms of patient flow or people flow, student and faculty, patients, what have you. So he went to somebody in the university and they got $10,000 for an architect to work with us. And since we thought we might want to approach the Kellogg Foundation for some financial assistance in this building, we got an architect that was had done a lot of work for them, a fellow by the name of Lou Sarvis from Battle Creek. And he did our original schematics along the line that I'm talking about, expansion of the old building and what have you, some remodeling. Then that whole thing went into limbo. We had decided, or everybody who had worked on this had decided that a proper estimate for the building would be $8 million. And that's the figure we all used. But in an effort to curry favor with the legislature, one university executive, who will remain unnamed, used the figure $4 million and put it in along with the description of what we would do and what we knew would cost $8 million. So the legislature got kind of enthused. It was a bargain. And we had to pull back. We couldn't let them approve it. Yet, I don't know what pride or what have you prevented that man from saying I made a mistake or I made an error. So we had to protect him, and what it amounted to was just withdrawing the dental project for several years until they'd all forget that $4 million figure. And that carried right through Dr. Jesuic's tenure as dean and into mine. And I became dean in July, and probably September or October that year, we got together a group of alumni from around the state, all dentists, and met with President Hatcher and some of his vice presidents in the old Regents room, and that's where we kind of got things started. In the next year, that would have been 62. Probably 63, 64, we got money for preliminary planning. And that's where the design of this building as it now is was developed and so forth, and where we finally got to the point of realizing that remodeling space was going to be just about as expensive as tearing it down and replacing it with new. And the only problem was that we decided that this would be the site. Now, there was some pulling and hauling. People in medicine would like to have seen us over there near the hospital. I don't know where exactly we would have been. There were other people who would like us to have been on North Campus, which we thought would be a little bit too detached for patients and so forth. I'm not sure that's true or not, but at that moment, that's the way we felt. And nobody would agree that they would replace the facilities of the Kellogg Institute if we went off this site. So we decided we should stay on it. And it was easy enough then to go back here and build that clinic building and so forth. But in order to keep school going, we had to keep the old building intact and then tear it down and build the library afterward. And it was, if you've been reading about the replacement hospital now, you know, the longer you postpone construction in a time of inflation, the more expensive it gets. So we really paid a penalty to have that library by keeping the old dental building for, what, 2, 3 years that we, after we could have torn it down. And we could only build first in one site, and part of the site, and then the other. But we decided we were going to stay here. The following year, which would have been 64, 65, I really got into working drawings and finally broke ground in 66, February of 66. I can remember that because the next day I left for Mexico. But we had some tremendous, were you around in that time?
Yes.
When they did
Yes.
all the pile driving and whatever you out here, that was what was called a sinkhole, a bog. And they had to go a long way down to get into to firm footings.
There were some temporary buildings.
My old classroom and stuff, that was cleared out very
Yes.
quickly. That
Yes.
didn't amount to much. But really to get down to a firm foundation was quite a problem for them. But they made it. We haven't sunk into anything yet. So,
Still
which
in
reminds me, at one point, I guess our local paper, now it's called the Explorer, and I don't know what it was called then, put out an issue saying that we were sinking, that something was wrong with the footings, and that the wiring was wrong, that concrete was cracking up. All this was an April Fool issue. And that got to the legislature and caused more trouble because nobody read April 1. They just read that this new building was virtually in the state of collapse. And we had to explain that to a lot of legislators before we could go ahead happily with it. But the biggest problem, of course, was money. And we got the original estimate was that this would cost $11 million, and we got an appropriation for $11 million. We needed funding for that research space, and we went to the federal government for research space money. And we didn't have much room for research, so because we didn't have a big research program, they wouldn't give us money, or couldn't give us as much as we thought we should get. We got pinched a little there. Kellogg Foundation gave us $1.5 million basically to build the Paradonal and Crown and Bridge Clinic and to air condition the Kellogg building. And the funding from federal government to Health Manpower Act was about $5 million. And I don't know what all that's adding up to right now. I hope it's right, but I've gotten the cart a little ahead of the horse. We didn't get that $11 million right off the bat in the legislature, and we found that we were $4 million short when we got our estimates in. And we had to take again, it was going to take so long to redo the plans to get back within that original budget that the price would be up again to $4 million too much for a lesser building. So we stopped and used our plans, narrowing some halls, and got about $1 million out. Got more quarry tile out and more brick. There would have been much more brickwork and tile in this building than you see today if we'd been left with our original planning. And then we went back to the legislature to get that additional $3.3 million to round this thing out. And that was interesting. I remember there was a man, again, he better remain nameless, but who had a job similar to that of Jerry Miller, who, as you might be reading now, is a budget director or what have you in Governor Milligan's office. And for some reason or another, he didn't particularly care whether it was a dental building or not, and he had to give some kind of approval to that supplemental appropriation bill or it couldn't go forward. And nobody could find out what was holding this up. We finally did. And Emery Morris, that I referred to earlier, helped me pry that out of that man's office. Did it really in about an hour. And we got it moving, and that day when we got that supplemental bill, of course, we all celebrated a bit, but the work would just begin. You always think of those points as points of real celebration and what have you, but really they aren't, because from that point on you had to make sure it got constructed the way you wanted it to be, and you had to argue to get money to operate the building. And I was very fortunate over the period of years when we needed to get funding for operations that I had become acquainted during our construction period with a man who was on the Senate Appropriations Committee and who was chairman of the Subcommittee for Higher Education. Garland Lane was his name, from Flint. A lot of people felt that he was a hard man to work with, and maybe he didn't give anything away. But he was always a good friend of mine, helped me a lot as we needed to finance this building.
What was the total cost of the building? Do you recall when it was?
I'm not sure. I was talking to former Vice President Pierpont about that the other night. And we figure that with the parking structure here, and that's what gets us mixed up, that wasn't really technically a part of this program, but it kind of got fuzzed in. It was university money that for a parking structure. It ran around 22, 23 million, 22 probably. And then we used capitation money later to finish off the basement level of the clinic building and the clinic building, period. And that took quite a bit of money because there weren't some of those areas down there, if you recall. They were just dirt-floored building, rooms down there in the basement. We finished them all. I don't know what that cost, and I suppose another $1 million.
So we really moved from a building, the old building, if I recall the figures, something like 65,000 square feet, into this building, which is 300,000 square feet, something in that.
I read all that on a piece of paper down there.
I read it the other day, so I think it's fairly accurate.
You're probably right. I get mixed up. Some of these things that don't really make much difference, I leave on a piece of paper and look up if I need them. Well, I don't try to carry them in my head.
I think it's an interesting contrast of how, what a dramatic change that is from 65 to 300.
Sure. So was the budget. From I think in 1962 it hit $1 million, and now it's between 9 and 10. So been a big increase in the dollars going into it. Part of that's inflation, I know that.
How do we then compare the number of graduates that we had in the old building of 65,000 square foot into this new facility?
Well, let me tell you that. Let me tell you one thing first, though, very quickly. Some man who had worked on this building was in 2 or 3 years ago and estimated that whatever we'd paid for it, that it would cost around $50 million to build at that time, which would be even more now. So I don't know what it would cost to replace this place right now. But as far as enrollment's concerned, we used to accept 97 students. It's easier to talk about accepting than graduating. And now we accept 150 dental students per year. We accepted 39 dental hygienists. Some of these numbers are odd because that's the number of chairs that were available. And now we've accepted 80 in each of the 2 classes since we got into this building. We used to run about 55 graduate students, and now we're running probably 105. And that's the difference in enrollment. And we are kind of tied to that enrollment. We will, there are, I know, people who would like to decrease the size of our classes. Some of our own faculty would like to do it, but it's nothing you can do just quickly, or you're going to have the budget reduced proportionately. And I think somebody's going to have to work very carefully with the legislature. Probably going to have to develop some kind of a manpower study for the state of Michigan projected in the next several years that people will have some confidence in and use that. I don't know how it would come out, whether you should maintain enrollment or increase it or decrease it. I think that whatever we're going to do has to be matched with what the University of Detroit's going to do. If they're going to fall back in enrollment or anything of that sort, that would be a reason to maintain it here. I think that this school has operated, and I really think should, to try to take care of the service, of dental service to this state. And that means providing the proper manpower. And even though this is a time or colleges are talking about shrinking enrollments and so forth. If such a thing should happen, I'm not trying to say that I even think that it's going to, but if the University of Detroit's dental school should go out of existence, there'd be, I think, a good reason to talk about expanding this, and despite what's going on in terms of financing of higher education, just to maintain the services for the state. Again, I'd want to back that with a study, but I think that's probably the way it would turn out.
So the building and the immense amount of work that it took to build this certainly is a tremendous part of your career.
Sure.
Are there other things that you would look to as things that were personally gratifying to you?
Oh, there are a lot of them. One of the big things is working with the American Council on Education on the survey of dentistry. That, I think, was something that meant a lot. These the efforts I put forth in Latin America have meant a lot to me personally as to what I've accomplished in the world. And I guess really some of the things that I've accomplished I didn't even know I was accomplishing. And that may seem a funny way to say it, but I will expand upon it for a minute. You know, when you retire, like I'm retiring, where it was a public announcement was made 2 years ago, and all the folderol about getting your replacement and so forth, eyes really get centered on you about retiring. Everybody that comes to see you says, what are you going to do when you retire? Or, what do you think about retirement? This says something about retirement. I get sick of hearing it, you know. But the thing that I wanted to say that has made me feel good, and good about things that I don't even remember, and that is there have been a lot of faculty people come in, and some that aren't faculty, and wanting to thank me for things I did for them years ago, often in helping their career and shaping it and so forth. And really, I guess what I did in every one of those instances was sit down and try as honestly and earnestly as I could to give them advice, and at least in these instances, the advice worked out. There are probably some carrying guns around out there that where it didn't work out so well, I don't know. But I've had even a couple of three fellows cry in my office recently about that sort of thing, and I'm not an emotional person, and I don't cry with them, but it makes you, I don't want them to cry, but it makes you feel good that you did accomplish something in this world, and they're hard, those things are kind of hard to define. You really, I can only tell you what some of these people have said.
I think the interest that they have in your retirement is born out of that. You certainly have developed many friends and people that admire you that will be coming on Thursday evening for your retirement dinner to demonstrate that fondness for you.
Well, there's something that I've told a couple people lately that I've had going for me that I guess nobody else can ever. At least I don't. I started off with a smaller school. I've been here 41 years. I was a teacher to a tremendous number of our faculty. The younger ones I didn't teach, I know that, but I participated in the employment of most of them, in their appointment of every chairman. Do you remember Bill Fitzgerald?
Yes.
He wasn't here too long, but in some ways he was perceptive, I'll get it. And he came around to me one day and he said, you know, I really figured out one thing about you. You're a father image to a lot of these people. And maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
I think
maybe
so.
There is, maybe there isn't. But I have got an unusual relationship with a lot of the faculty. You'd be surprised over the years how many personal problems have been brought into my office, how many people I've sat with, guys you wouldn't believe it, who were crying about things that a personal nature that hit them and things of that sort. So
and sought
It's
your
been a
advice and
different,
counsel.
it's been a relationship that somebody on a 5-year appointment as a dean, I don't think can have.
Is that
Yes.
going to change the deanship dramatically
I don't know.
to shift?
I don't know. It all depends on how many times they renew them. I think there are dangers to it. I have worked for years in Latin America to get away from the appointment of deans on a term basis, and from there down there, you're appointed dean from 3 to 5 years generally, and there's no permanency to administration, and really what you have is somebody running for office almost all the time. And I don't think it'll ever come to that in this country. I don't mean that, but there's always a temptation to make decisions, particularly toward the end of a term, that will somehow make you be favorable when you're reviewed by some committee. And in Latin America, a number of schools I've worked with, we set up a full-time position as director of clinics or coordinator of clinics, because that was the only person that could be depended upon to be there 5 years later. And really, that man soon was running the school. So I don't know. I hope that it never gets as bad as it's been in Latin America, because if it does, that'll be harmful.
You mentioned earlier in our discussion about traveling in Central America, and you're fond of that. Do you have plans to do some of that after
Not at this
retirement?
moment, but sometime in the not too distant future, I want to get back to Costa Rica and Panama. That's for sure.
Certainly an area that's a major part of your activities.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be included in one of those people that will ask you about retirement plans. Maybe if we answer that question once and for all here, do you have plans for retirement?
Not really. I have some breathing problems, and so my wife and I have been talking about whether or not I might live more comfortably in Arizona. And sometime this summer, we're going to take a couple of weeks and go down and see if we can tolerate the heat during summer. If we can, we'll go for a longer period next winter. And if we still like it, then I think we might move to Arizona.
Well, I wish you well for your retirement dinner on Thursday evening. A lot of people will be coming and expressing their appreciation for all that you've done. And I personally feel that it's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to spend this time this morning and reminisce with you about a very fine, outstanding career that I'm sure that you must be very proud of.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Dean.
being with you.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.